is our DOT group with Lihue Airport and Wiliwili Harbor and Port Allen Harbor. So do we have DOT rep?
Yeah, David, this is Ella Foley-Gannon, who's special counsel to HDOT, and I will give the summary. And we also have some technical people on the call if there are questions that come up that we want more technical detail. But I think overall, I want to start off by saying that, you know, we were really pleased with the way things went this year. And we hope that the committee can be pleased as well, that, you know, this was obviously a significant year, and to get going just before the fallout season, you know, presented some challenges, and then have a pandemic going on and other things happening, made it all a little more challenging than we maybe would have thought of. So I said we're really proud of the efforts that you know, we know our internal team made, and the agencies made, and the other applicants have made as well. So we thank you for your continued support with this program. As an overall summary of what happened at the HDOT facilities over the last year and this last fallout season, you know, we had the advantage that we've been doing this level of almost this level of intensity of searches during the last couple of fallout seasons. So we really had a program in place that allowed us to meet the target deadlines, as was shown on the summary of, you know, we were continuously doing monitoring both at, you know, right after sunset and right before sunrise, and that was carried out by people again who have experience with that, with HT Harvey as one of our consultants, and at the airport at Lihue we have the USDA Wildlife Service biologist as well as the HDOT security, who are all involved in that and are all trained as part of the efforts. At the harbors, we have HT Harvey as well as some of the harbor personnel doing the training. And I have a predator control problem happening right now. Excuse me. He always likes to try to join in on these meetings.
I have the same problem, Ella.
You need a little bit better control here. So we, you know, we were able to run those, and we have a high level of confidence in our ability to detect things. And again, the experience I think that we've had of having that number of monitors and on this facility for a period of time is something again that we're quite proud of. And that is one of the reasons that there was a discussion about the calculation of take based upon the efficiency tests that have been done. And the harbors, we did do a searcher efficiency test in 2017, and there has been also some efforts made on Lihue, and based upon that data, we use the standard 50% at Port Allen, but at Wiliwili we have a 90%, and at Lihue it's 75%. So we did make the modifications that were described in the HCP. Most of them were actually already implemented by the time that the permit actually got issued, but we continue to also study those programs and make sure that you know, future improvements that we have identified or are considering will always take into effect to account the effect on species. The predator control. We essentially met the targets at the ports. We had a bit more of an issue at Lihue, and this was as a result of the change in the protocol that the Kauaʻi Humane Society had with regard to some of the animals captured. And, you know, at the airport, we have different contracts that we have to operate under, because there's the airport secure areas where we can only have certain, you know, people who pass certain security things have to be the ones who are in that area doing it. So we rely upon the USDA Wildlife Service to do the tasks that we're describing within those areas at the airport. And they, you know, they're in charge of similar programs throughout the year, also to deal with wildlife hazards for the airport services. So they have a high degree of experience. but under their contract, there wasn't the ability to implement the predator control program without the ability to utilize the Kauaʻi Humane Society services. So we had to figure out a way to get that so it could be contracted. And that has now been taken care of, and it is all in place. So next year we will certainly be able to carry out the programs as we have designated them and as we've implemented them as in the past, and as I said, and as we did at the harbors. So that was, probably our biggest challenge that we had. We did have take at Lihue with 2 non-lethal mule shearwaters found. They were both given to SOS in reportedly healthy condition. And then there was one that was found at Port Allen, but it actually flew away. So it was able to leave the site itself. At Willy Willy, there was one lethal a species found outside of the parameters. It was discovered during our monitoring, and we did document that and turn that in as part of both our in real time reports as well as in our annual report. So that is described and discussed. I think looking towards 2021, again, I said, I think our biggest challenge was just getting the predator control program in place, and now we are confident we have that. So I think that we will, again, we feel like that everyone has been learning some good lessons, and we look forward to continuing to operate under this permit. I am available for any questions.
So Ella, this is Loyal. Could you provide a little more information on the lethal take that was quote unquote outside of parameters? Thanks.
Sure. So my understanding that it was not on the port property itself. It was right outside the fence line where the Hawaiian cement complex is, if you know where that is. So it was found in that area. We again did document that it was near a light, one of the higher mast lights at the facility. So we certainly note that. And we understand that the way that we're documenting this is we sort of have our property lines, and then we talk about things as the information is available. And so we're happy to discuss that further, how that should not be attributed.
Thank you.
I'll just note that that's something that I know that the agencies need to circle back on. And thank you, Ella, for addressing that for HDOT. Well, I think we do need to provide a little bit cleaner guidance and talk to the applicants in advance of the 2021 season about how to deal with birds that come down that are found by the searches that are just outside of applicants' properties, and how to assess whether or not that's resultant from the applicant's covered activities or someone else's.
And I know that this is something that we had discussed in looking at the historic numbers. And I think that as we've addressed it in our report, and as I think as has been discussed, we think it's appropriate to really look at the facts around it. When you have somebody that's out there, you see, what is it in relation to what are, obviously you're going to have to be making some judgment calls one way or the other. But we think that usually there's enough to kind of do some detective work and make a call. And we certainly are happy to work through that with the agencies.
I appreciate that, Ella, and I agree with your assessment. I think that there's typically enough information on the ground to help inform that analysis on a bird by bird basis.
Right.
It's hard for applicants, right? Because we're not just talking about the property lines as being the end of where take can occur. Covered activities may result in take that come down near a property rather than just directly under a light. And so we need to be able to account for that. Meanwhile, we recognize that there's other entities out there that are not part of the ASHCP that take may be resulting from, and those birds may be coming down from a different entity's light as well. And we need to be able to have that reflected in the analysis.
Right. And that's they said that's been our goal of just trying to make sure that we set out all the facts that we're seeing. So everybody has as much information as possible.
Thank you, Ella.
Thank you, Ella. Any other questions, comments? Okay.
All right. Well, again, thank you. We really appreciate the the work that you have all done on this. And again, we look forward to continuing to have this evolve and progress.
Yeah, good deal. We really appreciate DOT's collaboration on this. It's great. And having your leadership down there has been very helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. Item 8, we're going to move into Princeville Resort Annual Report.
Oh, it's Reg David. This is one of those properties where I was able to visit because it's completely under construction and shut down. It is a property that's had a very mature Seabird program since about 2007. And fortunately, we were able to rehire some of the security guys that have been involved in our under the previous owner's control that worked on that for years. The biggest significant change is that essentially the hotel was shut down in April and has not reopened, and it has been completely gutted, and they're rebuilding it. There are no guests. There are no lights on at night. There is no construction at night. And I think the pictures that were in our annual report show that that's essentially completely dark. We did step up predator control from previous years. We have a contractor and their staff on site involved in the construction. Fortunately, it's a construction company that I've worked with before that worked at Kauaʻi. So almost all of the workers that we retrained have been through the Seabird awareness training multiple times. And they're also trained to find cats and to immediately report them. So I think given that essentially the hotel was completely dark and pretty dangerous to work in at night, that they did a really good job. So I'm available for questions.
So Reggie, this is Loyal. You
Hello.
said that everything was dark at night, but the little slide we're looking at says the parking lot lights were.
Right, the parking lots, and so the parking lights are on. There's no parking there per se. It's where they're marshaling all the equipment, and we followed what is required in that we turned off 50% of those lights. So it did follow standard protocol that we've used in the past. The only other lights that were on are some very small inkies along the first part of the driveway, just so that nobody kills himself at walking down that. But there is no activity on the property after about 4 p.m.
So the lighting in the parking lot, or the parking lots, were the only places that needed to be searched?
No, we searched the whole place.
Even though it was dark?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments for Reggie?
Reggie, no turtle anything at Princeville this year, right?
No, we've never had one there. But also during the construction phase and continuing today, that beach is completely cordoned off from the construction site. So anybody that works on the site has no access to the beach. There is a public access path down to that beach, but we have no control over the beach at this point.
Okay, thank you.
During the time that the searches were taking place, were any cats seen?
Yes, and we did remove several animals. Yep.
I guess I'm just wondering about the cause and effect of that. I mean, I know that there's animals removed, but for example, if there are cats seen, is there an increase in effort of removal following that observation to make sure that any
Yes.
incursions are taken care of?
Yes. So, I mean, the huge difference is that this is no longer, well, it's currently not an active hotel.
Mhm.
So there are no dumpsters, there are no restaurants, there's no food being thrown out. There's nobody there to feed cats. So it's very different from when it's actually operating as a hotel. So essentially our contractor moved traps around based on sightings. And we removed way more cats in one season than we've ever removed before.
Interesting. So even though there was a lack of dumpster material and that kind of stuff that would attract cats, there were actually more cats removed than in prior years?
Well, we stepped up our predator control after site visits by the ESRC and others in past years. I mean, this location is within a very large resort. So there's a lot of people around that have, it's like 29 acres within the entire Princeville development. So I don't know how many thousand homes and businesses there are in there, but quite a few.
And Reggie, I haven't lived on Kauai for about 2 years, but I'm assuming there's still chickens, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I don't have an owl there for me. So yeah, we got chickens.
And Reggie, just if obviously there's nobody using the parking lots, but they're still getting searched, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
There's only one parking lot.
It's that upper one, right? That's
Right, it's pretty small.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you. And I think this is probably just you, Kauai Marriott Resort.
Aloha, folks, it's me again.
Correct.
So once again, this is a hotel. It got hit very hard by COVID. It essentially was shut down and blocked off for a large period of the season. We did do searches every 4 hours, all those days. All the lighting at the facility were modified by HCP guidelines before the season, and we were at like 4% occupancy, and that basically there's a timeshare faction of this, and that were owners. So there were very, very few people there, and we did conduct predator control throughout the season, and we trained 179 staff, and obviously did not have any take.
Hey, Reggie, the downed birds that have been found in previous seasons, were they found by the trained staff searching for them, or were they found by resort guests?
We've had very few birds at that property. I would have to say that almost all of them were by staff. So we have when the hotel is open, we have first responders. And then ordinarily we would have about 200, 250 associates. And essentially they're trained just like we did with St. Regis, is that you're supposed to search your duty station, your rooms, your balconies, the hallways. And if you find a bird, you're supposed to call security. You're supposed to stand by until they come and take care of the bird.
I think what I'm wondering about again is this idea that there's no take, no detected birds, but you have a lot less staff on site, a lot less eyes on the ground. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to that.
Sure. The only way I can speak to it is, one, in the past, our take has been extremely low. I also run the program at Hokulea Timbers, which is the adjacent property. We have 3 biologists that are there 7 days a week. We are actually lit in operation, and we had no take of seabirds this season.
Yeah, I want to just be conscious, though, of the fact that like a number of these resorts, when we did the site visits, there were a lot of cat detections. And so there's been several changes. One is that there's been increased cat control and removal, which theoretically should increase the likelihood that you're going to detect something that falls out, if it falls out. Because you don't have as many predators around dragging it off into the bushes. But secondly, in this year, you had less people around to detect the ones that did fall out. So even if there's less predators around to drag them off into the bushes, there also are less people around to detect them when they fall out. So I think it's just important to hold both of those ideas in our heads.
I think that makes sense. And the only thing I can reference it to is to the adjacent property, which is 690 acres, which we have, you know, very significant staff presence on.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Reggie regarding the Kauai Marriott? Thank you, Reggie. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Okay, we're gonna move along.
So
Reggie Cruise Lines, is this you? Oh,
it's me again. Yep. So we had a particularly unique year this year with this ship. It was moored in Honolulu Harbor and is still there, and it did not sail this season, and it has no guests. It does have some staff on board to maintain the engines, the electrics, and all of the required permits. The lighting obviously was modified a long time ago. There essentially were very, very few cabin lights on because we had no passengers. This is one of those ones where we've had a program in place since 2007. Anybody that gets on the ship that works for us has to go through the Seabird training before they can take their duty station. And we trained a total of about 248 staff members. And not surprisingly, we had no take.
okay.
That was your toughest report, Reggie.
Yeah, well, it's just, I wish that was the first one.
Duke. Yeah, it was a different kind of year this year. Where was that boat? Was it Nawili Willie?
No, it was moored in Honolulu Harbor, right across from the Topo building.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they've had to move it out to
Okay.
sea offshore and anchor it a few times when the port needed that slip. But basically, it's been there since I think April, and it's still there.
Yeah, the cruise ships they were one of the first big harbingers of things.
Yeah, it's pretty gruesome. But I was really impressed with the whole disinfecting routine they have on that ship. You go on that ship, I was able to visit it because it was in Honolulu, do lighting audit and everything. And they follow you around with a fogger the whole time you're on the ship. So it's pretty impressive.
Wow. Okay, didn't sound like any other questions, comments for NCO?
Reggie, I might have
Okay.
step away
so-
for a
Okay.
puppy, but are they planning on starting off again for 2021?
We honestly don't know. They've not told us. We have not seen any I've checked a few times on the internet and I'm not seeing any ads for them. I mean, if they can, they will, I'm sure. But realistically, right now, trying to run a cruise ship is pretty gruesome, and Hawaii still has some of the toughest COVID compliance rules in the country. So I don't know.
Right.
But we'll keep the agencies informed as we find out.
That's what I was going to be asking for, is that would you mind giving us an update when
Oh,
that?
certainly. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, thanks, Reggie, for all your various reports. So we're doing pretty good on time here. So that was the last of the items. So some of the, some of the other things that follow up, at least from our agency, the monitoring, validation, circuitry efficiency trials, we, because of the COVID things and the fact that a lot of places were shut down, made it difficult to do those validation trials. So we're supposed to do that in the first 2 fallout seasons, and hopefully we'll be able to get that going. It looks like things are starting to open up a bit now, and I think operationally we should be able to get out there on the ground with our branch folks and start to get calibrated and do some of those trials. We're exploring using the trained search dogs, and we're in the process of getting quotes for that. Let's see, predator
David,
control guidance. We're gonna. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I just have some questions before we adjourn. In general
Yeah,
questions.
no, we're not adjourning.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So it's too bad Lindsay's, looks like she's no longer on the call, but
I'm here if you have a question.
Oh, you're there. Okay, great. Oh, I'm not sure who's the one to answer. It's either you or maybe Michelle is, but so with the mitigations on Oahu for the windmills and the Seabirds, that mitigation money was going to Kauaʻi, but I couldn't remember if it was going to support the predator-proof fence that Lindsay presented about today, or if that was a different mitigation. Different. Which one was that? Can you remind me, please?
Gosh, Kavika, let me go back and look at it. I think it's barn owl control across the Nepali coast, and maybe the Hanapu fence, but I need to go back and double check that.
I thought it was a fence on the other side of Kalala Rim, if it wasn't this one. What is that one?
There's Pohakea and Hanapu, and Hanapu predator fence is coming from REPI money, and then Pohakea is just a grant from NIFWA from their Pacific Seabirds Fund. So totally different funding streams.
Yeah. I'll go back and cross check and send you an.
Okay, then my general question was, we have all these different mitigation projects that are part of different mitigation packages. We got TUC stuff and this HCP, and then the stuff that from Oahu that's being funneled there. And I haven't seen, it'd be helpful to see some kind of comprehensive understanding about how these mitigation packages are collectively working in support of recovery of the birds. Is there a way that we can somehow get an understanding of that as we assess how everything's going from our perspective on the committee?
So I'll ask Kate to answer that, but we had talked within the committee, I think it was last meeting or maybe the last time, of there's a bunch of different Seabird projects coming up, and it would be really helpful before we dig into them to actually do a day on a status update on Seabirds. What's going on? Where are they? What are the efforts that are already ongoing to support the recovery of the species? What mitigation has been happening thus far, and how is it working? And Kate, maybe you can answer more, but I think that is still something that DOFA is going to try and do, so that we have that information in our back pocket as we continue to talk about Seabird issues.
I'm trying actually to figure out how to unmute Afshin because she's trying to participate and she was talking and no one could hear her. Afshin, you want to try again?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Sorry. I just wanted to answer Kavika's question before. I think he was referring to the Kauaʻi Seabird mitigation, and that is on, or it was occurring in the Hononapalinar and the Hanakoa and Hanakapiai sites for predator control and seabird monitoring. So it's very different than this project. Yeah. That's all I wanted to chime in.
Do we have an update on the Quasi-Bird Recovery Program director and that kind of stuff? Because they're somehow involved in these things, right?
Yes, we're in the recruitment process right now.
And I just wanted to add something quickly. Emma Ewan just recently went through an exercise where she compiled all of the fencing sites statewide that were done not only by state, but by partners. And she had a subcategory for predator exclusion fences, both existing and planned. And so while that's not necessarily what seabird mitigation is going on, it's actually a starting point because a lot of the mitigation does involve fencing on some level. And so on an informal basis, we have a Oahu Seabird group, which has been compiling everything that's going on Oahu. We've talked about expanding that statewide. So not just to be the seabird hui that deals with the listed species, but also everyone working on others. So this coordination effort is something beyond the ESRC that those of us that are working in that space are trying to consolidate so that you can answer questions like this a little bit more readily.
Yeah, it's just hard. I don't think we have the context we need as ESRC to assess how these are going. It'd be nice if we could start off these updates with some kind of, I guess Andre would have done it before maybe, but just the overall status of what's going on with these species in the area of concern that we're reviewing, and are things looking up, are things looking down, is the mitigation actually working, or are people just going through the steps but the birds are still disappearing? I think we need a little bit more context so we can fulfill our roles. I'm not sure how we get there, but
Speaking as not as the prime contractor on this project, but I guess as an individual representing my organization, we're reaching a saturation point in terms of the number of social attraction sites that can be set up on any given island based on the research of how many birds you draw in per unit area. So even though those 3 fences I just mentioned on Kauaʻi are all 3 different funding streams, they're functionally drawing from the same pool of animals. And so we do have to be cognizant and really compiling everything across all projects, even if they're not under the mandate of the ESRC, because biologically, the birds don't care who's paying for it. They're all coming from the same area. So I do think, as an observer from the outside who's working across multiple projects, we do need to keep that in mind because it diminishes the value of any one project the more that you have going on. For social attraction, protecting colonies in situ is a totally different story, but for drawing birds in, we're getting close to what I feel is carrying capacity for that island.
Thanks, Lindsay. I think that's a really helpful observation, and it's going to be a thing that we end up having to talk about here sooner rather than later.
So I had a request for, I think,
We're gonna
go ahead.
go ahead.
Okay.
No, go
So
ahead, Melissa.
it was really nice to see compiled the compilation that Lindsay did at the end of her presentation. And then several of the questions that were asked, we were told, oh, that's going to be better addressed when you go through the individual presentations. But I actually felt like, given the data that were presented in the individual presentations, it wasn't as useful as seeing it laid out like that. And so if kind of the equivalent data could be also included in their slide presentation, paired with if DOFA is going to be doing the searcher efficiency or other types of checks, if that can be presented alongside of it, I think for each site it would be really useful to see, that yes, not only the trap nights, but the animals removed, as well as the searcher efficiency, and yeah, those kind of different metrics presented by each of the sites. Because yeah, I kind of felt like, and granted, I missed a couple of hours while I was having to give a guest lecture elsewhere, but I think yeah, we were told that we would see this information, but I don't know that I necessarily saw the questions answered that we thought we were going to have answered in the individual presentations.
So what I can maybe do for next time is copy that participant groups, their row from that table onto their report as well, because the information was in there. It was just in more of a verbal format that followed how I received it from them, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's a good comment, and I think a relatively straightforward fix. And in that way, it jogs your memory to ask the question of the participant when they're on the line.
Yeah, and we're all here now. So Melissa, if you got a question, ask it.
I don't have a specific one. Without like having that side by side, it's kind of difficult to, yeah, remember each one individually. I think it was more like there's some, and granted, like I said, I missed a couple of hours of the presentations from the individual groups, but the ones that I saw, I couldn't exactly remember which places had like, you know, no trap nights versus some trap nights and nothing caught versus something caught and all of that. And without pairing that with the searcher efficiency, which I understand why it wasn't done given the constraints of last year, it's difficult to know what that all really means, right? So you caught a couple cats or you didn't catch cats. How does that translate into the ability to detect when birds fall out?
So we had a conversation in the committee, I think it was last meeting or the meeting before, about trying to tailor these reports and the presentations to make it clear what is the requirement that the applicant would, or that the permittee is trying to meet versus what was accomplished. And Lindsay, that's something maybe we can talk about in advance of next year. This year is a funky one, right? They had just gotten permitted before the Seabird fallout season. We knew that they weren't going to be able to implement everything. And then COVID on top of it. But I do think that for next year's presentation, there is a way of showing the information in a way that elucidates what was the requirement or the bar that was needed to be met in order to meet the compliance of the permit and HCP. And then where they are on that. Because I think it helps the committee as we talk about what needs to be improved and where we're at on some of the things, or where a permittee exceeded the expectations that had been set forth.
This is Loyal, and I agree that maybe a slide with those that chart or that line of that chart pulled over would be useful. But I also want to suggest that the participants, when they were talking about their individual units, were very forthcoming with information, and I was very, very happy about that. They were very good at answering and addressing the questions clearly and pretty concisely, so I was really happy there. They did a good job, and I thought the overall presentation that Lindsay did was quite useful and quite effective, and so I gave a lot of people thumbs up. There's still things we need to go back and play with, and I think Dave's going to talk about some of those when he gets back to his stuff on what DOFA is going to do.
Yeah, and I'd like to just go back to what Jim had said earlier. It's not so much, maybe how many animals you remove, but what's the total impact, outcomes versus outputs. And so what we really want to make sure is that we're, not having impacts from predators and that the animals that end up on the ground have the best chance of surviving, being detected and rescued and whatnot. So yeah, that's something that's top of mind for us, and we're going to be working on that'll be part of the monitoring, the whole monitoring detection thing. I also, another thing to be looking at, I think, as we go along is the behavior. And when I've monitored seabird colonies that were experiencing cat predation, a lot of times that predation was right there. It wasn't like the birds were just gone. There, you could see predated birds there, and so hopefully that would show up in our searcher and monitoring, and the fact that we're not seeing that is probably a good sign. So anyway, that's something to think about. How what's that percentage, and are you going to be seeing predated birds, and the idea being, regardless of how many animals you remove, the fact that we want to make sure that there's just no predation going on. That's the ultimate goal.
Well, at least that the birds that fall out are sticking around long enough for the searches to find them, right? There is this interplay between predation and the regularity of the searches. And those are the things that we're trying to get at, right? Especially for some of these urban areas, it's probably unrealistic for us to say that no predation will occur. But it is more realistic for us to say that we'll tailor the predator control in a way that allows birds to stay around and stay alive long enough for the regular searches to find them. Hopefully.
Yeah.
I have a
Yeah, and so it just goes back, I think.
question. Sorry, Dave. I just wondering when we might,
No, go for it.
or kind of what the status of the KIUC HCP is.
Kate,
Almost done.
I don't know if Kate's on the line or not, but my understanding is that there's going to be an overview of KIUC at the April ESRC meeting.
Okay, and then I know the other bird issue we'll need to address is the amendment to, I believe, Napua Makani, because they got a petrel. And what our horizon is on that. I'm just trying to, because if we're going to have these kind of the Seabird workshop, we have all these issues kind of coming up, and what is the timing of those kind of coming at us so we can be well prepared.
The last I talked to Kate, she was trying to do the Seabird status update in April as well. Prior to the KIUC overview or in combination with the KIUC overview.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
This is Loyal. It's a question I think is for you, Dave, and maybe Koa and Michelle. But when we were working on this HCP, a couple things that were of concern just before it was approved were circling back on some of the issues that we knew we weren't going to be able to really address in 2020. That was even before we were talking about COVID. And those really were dealing with two broad topics. And we've talked about both of those today, but I just wondered how those are going to be addressed. And that's the circuitry efficiency, carcass retention aspects, which come back into what the participants look at from perspective of, you know, how much the actual take is. And then also how to do the take calculations, including the benefits from the SOS program. I think those were the two big things that we were talking about circling back and discussing in this meeting, or at this time period for when the annual report for this HCP came through, which it has come through now. So I just wondered how we're going to address those and who's going to be addressing those kind of two big issues, maybe three big issues, the circuitry efficiency, carcass retention, and the take, including SOS.
Yeah, I touched on that a little bit earlier, but so we kind of lost a year with the COVID thing in terms of calibrating on the circuitry efficiency. We're trying to ramp that up. We've also been hit with a fairly brutal, budget reductions and freezing personnel and whatnot. So we're in an even more precarious situation than we were a year ago in terms of our ability to, our capacity to be able to help. But it's still our plan this year, and Kate's looking into some contractors that could help us out with some dogs. And so we want to go out and especially prioritize the properties that have the higher detection assumptions. And so we're going to start working on that this year, and hopefully be able to get, at least the high percentage detection cohort taken care of. But there may be a way to do some kind of workshop for everybody, and but that's the plan still.
So for the searcher efficiency, I really applaud that. I think, and having the canine searches there is going to be huge, very important, and it will help put everybody's mind at ease, I think. So it's really important. So as long, when we get updates on that, or when with Kate what's going on there, that'd be great for us to hear about, I think, in the ESRC, because that was one of the big issues that we had. And Carcass Retention, actually this last year would have been a good one to work on that, since you didn't have hotel guests and stuff like that associated with some of the properties. But I understand that that's a bridge too far. But there's also the whole take calculation stuff that needs some work, because we're going to be addressing the, Rain's new publication that he had just was just not quite out by the time when we talked at the last year. So those are, I think, big things that need to be discussed with this in the ESRC at some point, because those were, I think, ESRC concerns last year.
Yeah, we can give you an update on both of those. And the agencies are talking about the SOS report. We still needed to take a look at it and do some analysis on it, and decide how we're going to treat it going forward. But like you say, it just came out, but we're aware of it. We're looking at it. Some of it too, we want to make sure, it's a good piece of information. It may be an opportunity to gather some more data going forward, and then we kind of want to see how the project's rolling out too. There's a lot of different things, like level of take. Is the level of take as expected or lower? How's the mitigation site work going? So there's a lot of different things at play, and but that'll definitely fit into the overall picture on mitigation, adaptive management, and whatnot. So we'll try to give you an update at the next meeting on that.
Yeah, because that's, in my mind, those are both big deals.
Yep. Yeah, agreed.
Thanks.
And hotel occupancy is still pretty low if that's a concern for conducting the trials. We still got a window here, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll do the best we can. We've got some pretty serious constraints at the moment, but we're working on it. Okay, other questions, comments?
Good job overall.
Yeah, I thought everybody did a great job. Thank you, Lindsay. Very nice overview and report, and super glad that you're the folks that are working on this. And thank you to all the participants. I thought everybody did a good job. And I think we'll just get better at this as we go along. If there's any feedback, go ahead and you can give it to us as a sidebar later if you want, just on ways that we can make this meeting more informative for you. We've got a few comments we'll follow up on. But looking at the big picture too, and we'll have another gigantic project coming online here, hopefully sooner than later. And Kauaʻi is going to turn into one big giant Seabird mitigation project, utilizing every square inch of real estate that we have to try to keep these birds extant. So appreciate everybody helping out with this. I know everybody's busy, and so we really appreciate all the expertise that we got on this committee, and all the expertise of the folks working on it. And the goal overall is to, stem the loss on the birds. We've had quite a bit of loss in the last 10 years. This isn't probably our biggest take group, but it's an important one. And then we got another really big project coming on, as we all know, and that will be very challenging. But we're working on it and really pushing the timeline on it as hard as we can.
For the participants, I just want to say thank you for preparing for this meeting and providing all this information. We thought that you guys did a great job. We really appreciate all the applicants actually being here and speaking for their projects. That was a big help. And we know that the fallout season is going to come sooner than we think it will. So we'll be in touch related to all the different things going on in prep for the 2021 season. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Michelle.
Welcome.
Okay, any other questions, comments, last thoughts?
One last thing for any of the participants that have beachside property, we may reach out to you about the sea turtle stuff prior to May and just make sure that we're all on the same page about that before we get going. And again, that's just an effort to avoid any circumstances where there's potentially sea turtle nests that y'all might not be aware of, and therefore we run into monitoring issues with. So we'll touch base about that sooner rather than later as well. Thanks.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and any participants that, people have been reaching out to the agencies, and so we're glad to try to assist as much as possible. And we have quite a bit of expertise, and we're willing to help wherever we can. So if there's any issues or you need, advice on how to proceed with various things, be it monitoring, predator control, and whatnot, let us know. We'll do the best we can to help you. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
We move.
Second.
Second, there we go. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Mahalo.
We'll be
Take
talking-
care.